Hello beautiful souls, and welcome to the very first episode of the Mother Gaia Birthy Pod. I'm Katie, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here with me today, sharing in this exciting new adventure. Whether you're a soon-to-be mum, a birth worker, or simply someone seeking a deeper understanding of pregnancy and birth, I'm so glad you found your way to this space. This podcast has been a dream of mine, and I started it with the hope of reaching more women like you so we have a real, honest conversation about birth and pregnancy. My mission is to provide you with the knowledge, stories and support that can help you feel empowered on your own unique journey into motherhood. Now, I can't think of a better way to kick off our first episode than by sharing the story of one of my closest friends, Tor. 11 years ago, Tor gave birth to her son Milo in a way that no one really expected, through an emergency C-section. Milo was born 3 months premature, and I was there in the background, helping her any way I could. I helped set up a quick wedding, and I even knitted tiny little clothes for Milo. And yes, I was even mistaken for being his father the first time we found out. Despite everything she went through, preeclampsia, weeks in hospital, emergency C-section, and months of travelling back and forth to see her baby in the NICU, Tor still tells her story with a smile and a laugh. She describes the entire experience as empowering, which is something that continues to amaze me to this day. I think that's one reason why I wanted to bring her on for this first episode. Her story is one of resilience, positivity, and pride. I think you'll find her perspective just as inspiring as I do. So, without further ado, let's jump right in and join the conversation at the beginning of Tor's journey, which not surprisingly starts with a pretty big announcement. Enjoy.
So as you all know, Katie is a proud father of my child.
Excellent.
Or so our GP thought.
I mean, if ever we needed a soundbite, there's one.
That was hilarious. He just looked at you and went, "Congratulations!" And your face was like,
I didn't fucking do
What?
it to her.
"I didn't do it. This is not my fault."
I'm just the lift. I'm just the taxi.
I don't even know how you ended up being with me that day, but I couldn't
don't
have
know.
asked for somebody better.
Well, exactly. Because I have no idea what happened to anybody and why it was down to me or anything.
I
It
don't
just
know.
happened to be there.
So funny.
Mm.
Ah.
So, I mean, from what I remember, because I think there must have been a change of not rules, but there must have been a change of how they did it, because obviously you went to the GP to go, pretty sure I'm pregnant. I've got pregnancy test that says I'm pregnant, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now what?
And he pretty much went, "Great, you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Well done."
But handed over all of your booking information and leaflets and here, have this. It was pretty much like a bounty pack you got given, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And all I'd expected was for them to actually do like a blood test or something, because I didn't quite believe the pregnancy test. And he went, "Well, if the pregnancy test says it, then you are." And I went, "Oh." And he went, "Here you go." And that was kind of that.
Yeah. Because obviously when I got pregnant with James, but I didn't even mention it to the GP. It was you need to ring the midwives and get a booking
Cut
in.
out the middleman.
Yeah, just we're not even going to bother doing this. It takes up 10 minutes of the GP that you don't need to do, kind of thing. So,
I mean, 11 and a half, nearly 12 years ago, it was a lot easier to get a GP appointment.
I mean, there is that, yeah.
I hadn't been with that doctor's surgery because it was the one on Nunnery Lane rather than Morelands, and I hadn't been with them very long, so I got in really quick. And they were really, really quick at everything. But when I moved back to Downton, they wouldn't have me back because I lived like 2.2 centimetres outside the catchment area, which was quite annoying. But they were a good doctor.
Yeah. So when you had your booking an appointment with the midwives,
Mm-hmm.
was the birth plan was just what they gave you then? So like, tick this box if you want this. That was
There
nothing?
wasn't anything. The birth plan wasn't even on the radar. I think they gave me a pack because my first appointment was my ultrasound, if I remember rightly, and that was at Bishop Auckland General.
Yeah.
And I pretty much went to that first appointment, got weighed, and they went, "Oh, we're not going to deal with you because Bishop Auckland are midwife led. And because at the time I was overweight, I was a high risk. And I was also a geriatric mother at 27, which is very depressing."
I mean,
And
I'm glad they've changed that because it's 35 now, but still I was geriatric when I was like, just get away with yourself.
I mean, come on,
Yeah.
make me feel more inadequate.
Yeah.
So I was allowed to have my ultrasounds there, but then I had to have a glucose test, various other things, all the like nuchal screening, the dating scans, all of that. It was all consultant led from that point, because I was overweight, which was rubbish, but it is what it is. I get the risks now that were involved in it. I don't think they were explained very well at the time. I think they just kind of went meh and wanted to push me off, because if anything goes wrong and you're expecting to give birth in Bishop Auckland, something goes wrong, they don't have anybody to deal with it. They have to send you to James Cook or Darlington or Durham, and obviously if you're in distress with your baby being born, you don't have time for that.
Yeah.
So they're like, right, just go. And I think the original plan was that I was going to be giving birth at Darlington, but then it all kind of escalated from pretty much 20 weeks, I think, when they found out that he wasn't particularly large. And then we got referred up to fetal medicine. So we went to Durham because I hadn't felt him move for a couple of days and I had a bit of a panic. And we went up to Durham and then we got referred on to fetal medicine up at the RVI. And I think that was like the next day. It was really quick. And I was probably about 23, 24 weeks pregnant at that point. And the consultant was this proper hatchet-faced old man who said, yes, the blood flow is not very good. This baby's very small. We could offer you a termination at this point. And I think Mark pretty much tried to hold me back because I was gonna have him.
Yeah.
That was just a ridiculous notion to me. No, not happening.
No.
I know they have to tell you all the worst case scenarios because otherwise it's not informed consent, but it felt like that was all he focused on, was this child probably isn't going to be able to breathe by itself, it's never going to walk, it could have brain problems, it might not even survive once it's born. They terrified the living bejesus out of me. And as a pregnant woman, you're pretty much terrified from the second that pregnancy stick dries. So you don't need anybody else telling you that you're terrified, especially when you've already been told, oh, you're too complicated for us to deal with, just because I was fat. So we went up to fetal medicine and they decided we would have monitoring every day. And yeah, it was at that point I think I'd had he hasn't moved. And of course, by the time we got to the hospital, he'd moved and he'd kicked the crap out of me. But we were getting to the point where we were going up to Durham every day and it was getting a bit ridiculous having to go and get monitoring and ultrasounds every single day. So I think I was 27 weeks when they admitted me, because he pretty much stopped growing at that point because the blood flow was terrible. I understand it now that I'm qualified and I know what an ultrasound works like. I get it now. The blood flow was just terrible. There's like 3 main bits that you want to look at and none of them were doing what they should be doing. So I can see now how perilous it was. At the time, I was looking at this screen going, oh, there's a bit of blue, there's a bit of red. It's going, how bad can it be? Really bad. Really, really bad. And I'm quite pleased that I didn't understand that because I was scared enough as it was. And I would have been literally terrified to move if I'd figured out what it actually meant. So he wasn't growing. He wasn't getting everything he needed. And they said, right, we'll take you up. And I got admitted to the RVI. And so he was born at exactly 32 weeks. So I was there for just over 3 weeks. And I think I'd been there maybe a week when I was getting sort of headaches and a bit dizzy and stuff. And they said, you're going to have to pee in a pot for a full 24 hours, which was like the most fun you can have. And they gave me what can only be described as, have you ever seen those massive big pots of tomato sauce you get on burger buns with the squirty lid?
Yeah.
Literally one of those minus the squirty lid.
Nice.
And a jug. And told me to pee in the jug every time I went and to save it. And yeah, I also had preeclampsia. But they said the only thing that's going to cure preeclampsia is this baby being born. That's going to happen really soon anyway. So they weren't really that bothered.
Yeah.
They really played it down. They were like, you're here, we're monitoring you. If anything's going to go wrong, you're already here. I was quite lucky in that respect. I think if you're at home and you're expecting a child and you're told you've got preeclampsia, you'd go into a spin. But I was already in the RVI. What more could they actually do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing at that point. So it was monitoring every day. Mark running up and down across the country. But yeah, it was rubbish. And he was born 32 weeks exactly. We said if we make it to 32 weeks, we'll deliver. And that morning, I had my CTG where they put like the buttons on your belly to measure everything, and it was showing that he was in distress. So we were told we would probably be expected to go down at lunchtime. So Mark wasn't even there yet, and I had my CTG first thing, and they went, "Oh, we're getting you in now."
Yeah,
because I could see like the fetal monitor, his heart rate just was going, and it was taking longer to come back up each time.
Yeah.
So all kind of hell broke loose really, and I was like, Mark's not here. I'm ringing him, trying to get him here, and he made it. He made it quite comfortably, but it was hairy. And yeah, we were told that he probably wasn't going to be breathing. He would need resuscitation. He'd need all sorts of oxygen, like everything that could go wrong, as they have to tell you. And I was obviously covered over. I couldn't see anything, but Mark was stood so that he could see what was going on, and he saw Milo come out.
Yeah.
And Milo screamed.
Yeah.
I was like, what is that noise?
I mean, just to make that very, very obvious, you had a C-section.
Oh yes, I had a cesarean. So he came out, he screamed, and he peed all over the doctor. And
well, I mean, welcome to the world, and he's been like that ever since. Let's be fair.
Pretty much, yeah. He had, I think, I was kind of oblivious to what was going on because I was just like so shocked that he'd made a noise because we were told that wouldn't happen. And I was like, is that our child? And I think Mark had a bit of a scrap with one of the nurses because they were saying, no, it's not Milo, it's not Milo. And he was like, pretty sure it is. And it was. I don't know why they said that it wasn't. But they put him in a little sandwich bag with his head poking out the top to keep him warm. And I sort of saw him as they shoved him past me in a whacking great big plastic box. And he had like a ventilator support up his nose, and I think he had it in for like 2 or 3 hours, and he pulled it out, and they said if he's pulling it out he doesn't need it. And by the time I got to see him, they had to bring me round on a bed because I was still numb. He had like a little hat on and a tube, but there was no like full-on ventilator like we were expecting to see. And he was already sort of starting to squawk and wriggle, and they said he wouldn't do any of that. So we were really, really lucky because he was teeny tiny. He was 2 pounds 5.5 ounces, and his head. Yeah, I mean, people who have babies. Yeah, I mean, people who have normal sized babies that are like 6 and 7 pounds. That's nearly 3 Milos.
Yeah,
he was so tiny, and his head fitted in my hand, and his feet didn't fit my elbow. And I'm only 5 foot now, so I'm not a big person, but he was so tiny, and so squeaky. And we were taught like how to hold him properly. They said that stroking his skin, because he was so sensitive, we would find that horrible. So you put your hands on him, you didn't like rub him, you just put your hands on him. And he was one of the few babies that laid on his belly quite a lot, because obviously he was monitored all the time, but they don't recommend newborns lie on their bellies. And I held him probably when he was about 2 or 3 days old. And at that point, he was just having glucose through a drip, because I didn't have any milk yet, because obviously he wasn't due for like another 8 weeks. And we were trying to get him to take a little bit of colostrum, and we had a right kerfuffle finding a bottle small enough, and we bought millions of bottles.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, he had like the cheapest, nastiest bottle from Asda, and that was the only one he would have because he just couldn't cope with the other ones. And we tried breastfeeding, but to be honest with you, his head was smaller than my boob. It just wasn't going to work. And I remember I got discharged quite quickly because I was fine, and he was still up in the RVI, and they'd given us like a little flat in the ground so that we could stay close, because obviously it was a heck of a trek to Bishop Auckland.
Yeah.
And they gave us this little flat to stay in. I think it's run by Ronald McDonald, but don't quote me on that. And I remember sitting in a pair of massive pants with these 2 pumps on both breasts, pumping like a dairy cow. And I just went, do you know what? I do not want to do this.
Yeah.
It was horrific. People who get to breastfeed are so lucky, but it's really hard. And the people who are breastfeeding their actual babies get to have that contact with their baby. I didn't. I was attached to a milking machine every 3 hours.
Yeah.
There was no enjoyment in it. There was no satisfaction in it. Everything was getting frozen. And I, 9 times out of 10, wasn't even feeding him because it was still going through a tube at that point. And I just thought, I've done everything I can. I have been through enough. I'm done.
Yeah.
And he had quite a lot of breast milk because by the time I did get going, honestly, I could have fed the world, or I felt like it anyway.
Yeah.
And because he was taking such small amounts, he had like a good 4 or 5 weeks worth of breast milk before he went on to formula, and then he went on to like a special high energy one for premature babies, and he's just gone from strength to strength. He's never had any issues. He's a little like, and he's short, but like I say, I'm only 5 foot, so I wasn't expecting him to be a giant.
No.
We went through quite a lot when he was quite young. They did lots and lots of tests, ultrasounds of like his brain to make sure he didn't have any bleeds because they're really common in prem babies. He had a horrible screening test on his eyes where I can only describe it as an ice cream scoop, and they put it behind his eye to check all his retinas and make sure everything was as it was supposed to be, because there's a specific well, they didn't really warn me, and I was holding him the first one. The second one I was like,
no palm him off to daddy. I'm not holding him while you do that. Good God, no.
Yeah, if I'd have known what I was signing up for, I wouldn't have done it. But yeah, there's this particular disease that babies who've had oxygen get, which is retinopathy of prematurity, and it's all to do with like high levels of oxygen at birth and all the sort of like nasty things it can do. And like I say, he's fine. He's never had any issues. He's just been really, really small. One thing that I will say though is after he was born, we got discharged. So they told me not to expect him home before his due date, which was the 5th of January. They transferred us through to Durham just beginning of December because he wasn't needing any oxygen and he was feeding. They just wanted him to be at a specific weight before they would discharge him. I can't remember what the weight was. I want to say it was like 4 pounds, but honestly, I can't remember. So they'd said, we'll send him to Durham to fatten him up. They sent him to Durham because it was closer to us. And he came home on the 17th of December. And that was because I threw a bit of a strop, because there was nothing that they were doing for him that I couldn't do at home.
Yeah.
He was holding his own temperature, because one of the biggest issues was with premature babies, they can't hold the temperature because they've got no fat. So they have to have like a heated cot, which is what the incubator's for. Or he had a heat pad underneath a normal, like, like the little plastic Tupperware pots things.
Yeah.
And he was holding his own temperature by this point. And he was feeding properly out of the cheapy Asda bottles, and he was putting weight on. He was wireless. He didn't have any monitoring on because he didn't need it. And I was like, I want my baby home. This is ridiculous. And at that time, there was loads and loads of flooding, and we were physically struggling to get to hospital every day. And I was like, it's just ridiculous. It's taken its toll on us because we're having to trek up here all the time, and I want to take him home. And I think if I'd have been a first-time mum who was a bit clueless and who wanted to go and show my baby off around the Metro Centre, I think they would have said no. But they knew how sensible we were. They knew that obviously I've got a background, not so much in babies, but in looking after people and caring and a little bit of nursing experience. And I wasn't an idiot. And they'd seen how I'd looked after him, and they kind of went, can't really argue anymore. So yeah, he came home 17th of December, which is a massive achievement for such a premature baby who was so tiny.
At this point during the recording, myself and Tor went a little bit off topic, so we've cut this bit out and we rejoined the conversation back to when Milo was quite little and we were having some issues with the corrective age. Here Tor explains a little bit more.
Yeah.
No, leave them alone because they know what they're doing. That baby is fine. Yes, he's not hitting everything that a child of his age is, but his gestation is 2 months different.
Yeah.
And 2 months in newborn days very long time.
It's a big jump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, he did things slowly sometimes, but other things he did a lot quicker. He hasn't read the book that tells him when he should be doing things.
No.
And I've always said that about Milo. I mean, I don't know if you remember the first time he walked, that was at your house.
Yep.
We were at the point where we were going to ring the GP and go, still not walking. We're a little bit worried. And he saw your cat. He stood up. He chased the cat, and he pretty much hasn't sat down since.
Yeah.
And that was literally at the point where we were starting to think, maybe we should do something. And like with his, excuse me, with his reading, it was like, oh, he's not getting anywhere. He's not getting anywhere. And then bam, all of a sudden he picked up like War and Peace and read it word for word. And he just does it when he's ready.
Yeah.
He will not do it because everybody else is doing it. He'll do it when he's ready. And as a parent, it's very, very hard to let go of that and let him do it in his own time. But equally, he hasn't read the book. He hasn't like got any previous experience of hitting these milestones, and quite frankly, he doesn't care.
No.
So as long as he's doing everything that I think he should be doing, I'm not going to stress about it. And I don't know if that's because of like the way I was brought up, with the way that my mum was with us as kids, and the way that I saw my mum with all the babies and things that we've had over the years as foster parents. But I don't want to say I'm relaxed. I don't want to say I'm laid back, but I know when to hit the panic button.
Yeah.
And when actually this kid's going to do it when he's ready. And I think that's something that.
So like I get a lot of people saying I'm a bit hairy fairy, that I have this whole thing about, oh, well, you've got to do it completely free birth and blah, 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 and don't go to the NHS and la, la, la. And I'm like, I'm not. It's just that was my experience for my last one. And I can only tell you my experiences that I've had personally, which is why I wanted to do this, so that people could have first-hand story experiences from other people who have done it in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I just went, well, this is my experience and that's all I've got to go off, that's not all I've got to go off, but it's all I can tell you because it's my story.
Yeah. And if you'd spoken to me 14 years ago, I might have said, do you know what? I want a home birth. I want my own pool. I want this. I want that. I want the other. Because at that point, I hadn't had any experience to know how it was going to work. And those choices were taken away. But I don't feel like they were stolen. They were just different choices.
Yeah.
You know, they did the best that they could for me. Would I have done it differently? I don't know, because I didn't have the opportunity. To me, all that mattered was having a live child at the end of it, after being told at like 24 weeks that potentially we might not have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anything above that is something to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me for the very first episode of the Mother Gaia Birthy Podcast. I hope Tor's incredible birth story inspired you as much as it did me. What an amazing journey she shared with us. If you loved this episode and want to support the podcast, you can head over to my Buy Me a Coffee page. Every coffee helps to keep this podcast going and allows me to bring you more empowering birth stories, expert interviews and extra goodies. You can find the link in the show notes, or you can visit buymeacoffee.com/mother_Gaia. And if you're craving even more birthy content, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for exclusive access. As a subscriber, you'll get first look at new interviews, extended interviews, extra birth information, and a few fun surprises along the way. It's the perfect way to dive deeper into the world of birth and connect with a like-minded community. In the next episode, I'll be chatting with the amazing Abby, a hypnobirthing expert who's here to break down myths about hypnobirthing. Spoiler alert, it's not just fluffy jumpers and meditations. Abby will explain how hypnobirthing can be an empowering tool for anyone looking to approach birth with more confidence and calm. So, hit that subscribe button, share this episode with all of your friends, and I can't wait to see you back here for episode 2. Until then, trust your body, trust your instincts, and remember, birth is powerful. See you next time. Bye.